Okay, thanks, Kayla. So welcome everyone to our little sibling bioregions mapping exploration. Just to give you a little bit of context, this is a little bit of an exploration conversation that we've been having on and off, and this comes from an idea that was originally seeded by Byron Joel out of Australia, um, who wrote the original article about sibling regions. And we started some conversations with him, and now we're kind of trying to bring this conversation to more folks, hear their thoughts, and invite them to participate in also getting a little bit more of a hang of what their bioregional identity might be, and to help us with a little bit of mapping as well. So I'm just going to do a quick screen share around where this idea of sibling bioregions comes from. So this idea is just actually comes from the idea of sister cities or twin cities. And if you look at the city or town where you live in, it's very likely that they will have multiple sister cities or twin cities. But normally they were chosen for several different reasons. Some of them to create like diplomatic relationships, some for economic reasons, for trade, or to strengthen some sort of political ties. But normally one thing that was never taken into much consideration was the ecology of a location. So the idea of sibling bioregions comes from the idea of reimagining this concept of the sister cities. Maybe we could actually establish relationships instead of based on political or economic reasons, based on ecologies and cultures of a place. So in this sense, sibling bioregions would be about fostering fostering relationships that are of mutual benefit from communities, between the communities that have of different bioregions that are climatically analogous. So this portion of climate analog is quite important in the sense that it will actually allow you to exchange climatic strategies in a sense. So, and the bioregions that would be connected in this way, they normally in your region you would have fostered, cultural practices that have grown with your ecological ties to your region. So this culturally and ecological practices would be exchanged between the regions. So the exchange would be grounded in your ecological reality. So you would be able to create relationships outside of your region, your immediate region, while still making ecological sense, because you would have a more similar ecology and cultural forms. And actually, we are facing a lot of challenges, as we all know. They're created by climate change, environmental degradation, energy decline, and we are actually losing a lot of this. We are actually losing a lot of these cultural forms that have evolved and that are appropriate for our ecological context. And we think that by doing these types of exchanges, it could actually help preserve them, because what has evolved with your ecology, your local ecology, will make more sense, will be less harmful to the environment. And being able to exchange these between regions would maybe help preserve this human etnosphere. So can be defined as the many varied valuable relics of traditional human cultures, practical, ceremonial, and otherwise, that are born from the relationship between a people and their associated ecology over time. And also this process of realizing sibling relationships would also allow people to foster their own bioregional identities and feel more grounded in them. And through this, we could potentially create new systems. We could help support bioregional administration, and also help regenerate our bioregions and these robust ecological functions that we've been degrading over time. So we've had a few sessions with folks at the Global Regeneration Collab, and we've looked at some things that we could be looking at. What bioregional characteristics we could be taking into account. So things like your watersheds, your biomes, things that are related to agriculture and industry. Just some examples. And one thing that actually came up quite a bit was how important it could be to take into account the history of a location and how the culture has evolved over time. So not only the things that relate to climate and biome, but also the cultural aspect and how cultures have evolved over time in different locations. And culture is obviously a very broad concept. There are so many things that can be taken into account. So we talked about how we can consider language as a cultural practice, how that can be taken into account also for exchange. We have the facets of the religion and spirituality, also the indigenous cultures that could be exchanging also through these types of, and could be that we could help, that people from a bioregion could help preserve through exchange as well, and just really valuing the fact that they are in that they exist in this location, despite any past stories about it and inappropriate handling of the situations, and also different climate adaptations that could have emerged. So yeah, so then we also discussed a little bit about different exchange opportunities and what we can actually learn from each other, what things could be exchanged, things like in certain cases you could do exchange around certain types of more regenerative agricultural techniques that have been used over time in climate analogs. We could exchange different knowledge about traditional food systems, about seeds and plants. We could actually exchange them in some cases when safe, different climate adaptations, and all sorts of different data around education, identity awareness. So there's a lot of potential here to things that can be exchanged, we believe, from these conversations that we've had so far. Yeah, and this is just a little introduction that I wanted to give you all. And maybe I can ask, I don't know if I missed something, handing it over there to Kiala to see, did I miss something? Do you want to add anything?
Thanks. Well, you shared a lot, and one of the things is that yeah, we had 2 sessions that were open leading up to this one already, and so that's some of what's populated in the Miro board. I, for some reason, wasn't able to copy the link of that Miro board to share it, so maybe we could put that in the chat so that people, if they wanted to on their own time, could explore it a little more. A couple of the things that and we'll talk more about, what emerged from those other sessions and kind of where it's going with the mapping effort that we want to do, and open up. So yeah, one that I wanted to mention was there were people talking about like cultural librarian exchange, or like the idea of multi-generational cultural stewardship. Some of these aspects of like how to bring the complexity of the cultural side. And then I wanted to just emphasize the regeneration context that we're in here in the Bioregional Regeneration Summit. So we're holding that regeneration context, and that was a part of our purpose in the exploration around the sister and sibling bioregions as well. So it's about cultural exchange and revitalization and restoration, and and in those ways, in many cases, reconnecting or deepening the connection to first people of places and the ecologies and culture of them. But we'll kind of talk more of that as we go. So yeah, I guess it's a good moment to do a share on the yeah, this leaning into the bioregional identity, and just starting a screen share with that piece. So let me get in the right place. And this will also be a moment where we get a chance to invite more participation from you all, because we can share the link to this too. Just get my share set up. So folks are seeing this.
Yes,
Yeah,
your screen is visible.
screen is visible. Perfect. Thank you. So we were exploring, as Carolina already mentioned, Byron Joel. We explored the information that he was using for gathering, and learning more about Sibling Bioregions. And I guess I can just briefly show that list. And so he had a list of these data types or data fields, things to take note of in order to learn about and identify the
was
sibling
a
bioregions.
draft. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that was a sort of draft or like the first stage. And then we've also, as we mentioned climate analogs a little bit, and in the chat that came up, Killian mentioned that. And so Andrew Millison, permaculture teacher, has put together an advanced course on climate analogs, partly with the intention of exploring anticipatory climate change awareness and things like that, just understanding climate that way and the climate in different regions. So there is a list that he uses in that course. That's just for a glimpse to see that. So we were kind of combining the two to make a kind of a minimum viable, but also exploring the expanded picture of what things would we want to notice about our bioregions and then take note of, that would create both an opportunity for people to see comparison or similarity, but also especially so that people can deepen their experience of being people of place. And so there's like the combination of the two. So there's especially learning about our own sense of place and where we are. And I will briefly open the larger set. Well, no, before I do that, I'll just talk about these first fields that we have. So the example that we want to invite, because we'll invite everyone to participate in this, and you can add your name and how to be in touch with you, email, and then you can add a general address. You don't have to add your your specific address or coordinates. The coordinates and the address are the same for this part because we're using Google Earth, especially initially, to show some of the climate analogs and also just to show that bigger picture. So you can basically just use an address, or you can get the coordinates. And if there is a cultural bioregional identity associated with your place, then you can include that. And that's also part of what I feel like, because can become emergent through this type of work. So we don't have to jump to that one, but if it's already out there, you could add it. And then the Copen-Geiger classification is one of the climate data pictures, and we'll show that soon in Google Earth. And then this ecoregions, you can explore there which category, which biome you're in according to that system. And we also included the native land map, which is a really nice example of one where, in fact, I'll just open this so that we can look at it briefly. I think, yes. Okay. So when we see this one, there's one of the nice examples is all the kinds of overlap. So you see that there would be different groups in the same, overlapping areas in different regions. And you can look at languages and so on in that way. So this is quite a sophisticated map that we would want to be able to integrate data from potentially. But it is a great place just to be able to do that research and taking a picture of where we are. And then there's another one which doesn't have any cultural context in it, but this Bioregions 2021 Earth. This one does give they walk through their process of how they, categorized or came up with bioregions. And I think one of our most important acknowledgements is that culture is part of bioregions, and so therefore that system wouldn't be, complete to itself. So that's a good bit of the that piece there. And I think that we were going to invite folks to be able to share into this, but we do have a session next week as well. And I want to make a moment for you. Yeah, Catalina?
Yeah, no, I just want to share that, yeah, we will invite everyone. We just don't have an idea of a discussion prompt that we'd like to offer or to invite a few people to share, which is around your bioregional identity. So if you don't mind, Kella, if you can call up, if you can open the field below. So we're please don't get scared because we're not gonna make everyone fill out all of this. But as you see, the list of fields that we've been exploring is quite large, and just sharing from my own perspective. So in my case, here in Portugal, there isn't a lot of cultural bioregional identity. There are 4 bioregions, but they are quite small. They don't encompass the whole territory, so there isn't really that cultural sense of it. And if you go through One Earth bioregion, which is a quite interesting piece of work where they have tried to develop bioregions for the entire world, then we end up with a gigantic bioregion that encompasses Portugal, Spain, and France. And thinking culturally, this is actually maybe a little bit too broad and doesn't make, for a local, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I ended up filling out a lot of the fields based on my local region of Sintra, which is a region that is much smaller than what they did. But this also helped me create a little bit more of a ground myself in the sense of place in my smaller region. So one thing that I would invite you to share a little bit is about what is happening in your region. Is there a bioregional identity that you associate with? Do you know others near you that are exploring bioregions? Like how do you approach this idea of bioregional identity from your own perspective?
Yeah, beautiful. So there is a lot here, and this could be a moment just to open it up for a couple of people to share reflections on, and also if you have any questions too, but you could share about your context as a way to where you are. I say context. It's like a where you are, like where your place is, and maybe some of these thoughts around it, either something that you feel really confident about or something that you have questions about. Either way, it would be welcome. So I feel like I want to stop the share for this part, and I'm going to
Yes.
send the link to that spreadsheet where you can add yourself to the to that list if you're interested in doing that. And we are going to, this is kind of building towards a prototype, as I mentioned earlier. So we're just kind of working out loud with you all here too.
Yeah. So would
frankly,
anyone like to share something about their bioregional identity, or how your how your region, if you do have one, if you don't, how you're feeling about this? Would be interesting to hear from you a little bit about this, since we're talking about this bioregional context.
I can share. So yeah, this is, I'm new to the language. So I have to say that I'm new to this, just the terminology. But I will say that as an individual in relationship with the land that is supporting life, and I am very connected to the main trees on the land. So that was my first kind of way of really mapping my, as an individual, my bioregion was really mapping the mycelial network, like the nearest mycelial network, and just kind of seeing, okay, these are the main largest trees on this land. They're they kind of, and not necessarily because they're trees, but because of they are the elder beings on the land with a connective capacity relationship, and they're communicating and providing in a lot of different ways. So, so I'm in a forest. I am in a forest. There are a lot of people who are associating their bioregion to the Sissipaha River that I'm in connection with. And I definitely feel connected, but it's not, that river changes, and there's just like a lot of differences. You feel the difference in the climate. So I'm really kind of using my senses and using my relationship to botanists and different, folks who are more aware of what nature is telling us, to really map out what the bioregion is. And it's a process.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I'm in Korea now, and I'm not Korean. I'm here because my son is here, and I plan to leave as soon as he graduates, like the instant. Not for any negative reasons, just that this isn't my space, and but the last bioregion I was connected to and had my fingers in the ground was in Michigan, Detroit, and even then, that was in 2010. I left there in 2012. Even then, the bioregions were, or the climate zones were shifting every 10 years, and that can only be accelerating. And so that was the reason why I posted my comment there, and so I was really happy and surprised and impressed that that's being included in what you are doing, because I just wasn't sure, what, it's just great that that's happening. But the problem is we've got all this planning going on, and you can hear the length of time and all the planning and many of the things that we're talking about this week and next week, that the times frames and what's happening physically in the world, there's somewhat of a disconnect, and we've got to be a little bit mindful about how rapidly these zones and such are shifting, how rapidly the ecology is changing because of the climate, etc. And I'm really, really happy to hear that included in your project. Thank you so much, and thank you for the response in the chat, Kiala.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Killian. Yeah, and welcoming. We've had some other folks joining too, and we've just been sharing a bit. I don't know which links we might want to reshare, but we were hearing from folks about, their sense of bioregion, their sense of place. There's a little bit of feedback from the first part of the session, and maybe one or two more people if you would like to share. And before I start responding to things which I would naturally jump into.
Can I just quickly ask, are you wanting us to put ourselves into a column on this spreadsheet?
Yes, so
that a
you are
request?
invited to do that. Yes, you are invited to do that. And that would be one of the links I want to share. Day was at some of our earlier sessions, so has already participated, but we did hide the prior participants in this one. And as I mentioned, we're still kind of prototyping from this. The goal is to, and we often hide the larger set of fields just to not have it seem overwhelming. But the first, and I think we kind of have a distinction that maybe we'll just indicate that, but basically below fields, like below like 16 and 17 with settlement, that's where, it could take a little longer to fill in. Definitely worth taking the time if folks have that and want to do it, but that's there. And it's also there as a visual prompt of like things you might talk about your bioregion, and the context of, becoming more tuned in as people place in that way. And then the goal is that since our session next Friday, we're going to be doing more with the mapping. And then in the mapathon in December, we're going to take it further and kind of hopefully have a prototype by then as well. So this is that stage. But yeah, it was really nice to hear. Also, just really appreciated Uhura, how you shared about the way you orient to place and like the tree, the trees. Because I think that is actually another pattern we're wanting to do this from like the ground up. So you mentioned the mycelium, so I really love that. And in one of our earlier sessions, somebody was trying to look that apparently there's an attempt to map mycelium globally as well, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, and I also love this. Also love this share because actually it's something that has come up in a previous session. Something that people suggested could be tracked or used to characterize a bioregion would be their species. What are the species that are very relevant? How are they distributed? And by exploring the trees, you are in essence exploring this that others have also pointed out would be something that would be really nice to map and track around sibling bioregion. Yeah. So yeah, back to you, Kayla, with maybe we can introduce with a little bit more detail how we can participate in mapping in your own bioregions through these sheets that we've kind of shown, but we haven't really explained the exercise, let's say.
Right, and I do see folks jumping in, and that's great. And yeah, you can pick a column or find one there. Oh, and I'm not sharing. I should share again, maybe.
Yeah.
But before I do that, Madeline?
Oh, I'm a little confused. I feel like there were a lot of columns and now there are few columns. Just want one of the leaders to check and make sure nothing went awry.
Well, I think we're good from what I'm looking at. And I think I'm gonna share again, and then we can see if that's still there. So this is like the bonus area below here. And then the idea was to invite folks to share, particularly if you are willing to share your contact info too, then it just kind of gets you into the loop of our next steps with this. And in one of the prior sessions, we did do, like, we just basically did some demoing of using the Köppen Geiger layer in Google Earth to show how easily you can find your climate zone that way. And it also is like one of the ways visually to look at the world that way. Yeah, and so far, this process of just filling in the first handful of things, is one way to touch base with this. But also, maybe even equally importantly, is to kind of review some of these other thoughts. In the last sessions, we generated more, such as hearing folks talking about things like biocultural corridors and really emphasizing the ways that we might want to track on the map, right? Because this bioregional regeneration mapping effort can then be the data can be more relevant and important in the context of regeneration and in the context of climate adaptation and so on. So that's part of the purpose of this effort. Yeah. And Carolina, do you want to share anything else about the sort of exercise or the prototype?
Yeah. So if you notice right there at the corner, so these are the fields that we have at the top. These are kind of the ones that are easier to, in a way, just few suggestions of things to fill out, because we would then use this to map a little bit and to create a map prototype. But actually, you can notice that in the left bar, you can collapse or not these fields that you have right here. And you can actually review them if you feel like it. You can take a look at it, or what other things have been coming up. And towards the bottom, you have things that were suggested in the last session, things that people are looking at. So we invite you to to mainly fill out the top. But then if you're feeling like the energy to review and maybe even fill out any of the bottom portions, please feel free. Yeah.
Right, and yeah, including adding ideas, which you can put in the chat, or you can put them in possibly in this side column or down below. Nice to know if there's new things being suggested so we can integrate them. And we're really aware that there's this dance between expanding the list to include many, many things, and then sort of making it manageable in different ways. But it is kind of still early stage with the prototype. Yeah. Beautiful. So because we're only doing a 1 hour session, I know we're orienting a bit, potentially compressing the part of
You
the
can go long
time
if you want. I don't know
on the
if
mapping.
you have the time or other people do, but there's nothing happening in this room beyond the hour. We deliberately left space open.
Okay, great. Well, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah, we kind of planned ourselves for an hour, so. But yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, and yeah, is it helpful next to do the? I feel like hearing from another person or two would be nice, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so we'll give just another moment for that before we do the next part.
And if anyone has questions or wants to say anything, anytime, it's a little bit like
Oh, good.
mapping work session. So yeah, exactly. But Madeline raised hand again, so.
Well, so you want people to just say how they feel about the bioregion where they live?
Yeah, you could share about how you feel about it, whether you feel the connection to it, whether you feel that there is a clear sense of bioregion or not. So it's kind of an open share
Mhm.
of, especially with, you know, what we just shared and with what's here, like what's coming up and yeah,
Gotcha.
what else
Well,
in the
I feel
summit is
very
informing
connected.
that kind of.
I feel very connected. I live in the Connecticut River Valley, which is on the western part of Massachusetts in the US. And something interesting is that my job is I'm an academic librarian, and one of my areas that I support doing research is regional planning and landscape architecture. So I really experience this area a lot through the eyes of my students and faculty. So they're doing projects all the time in the bioregion. And I'm like alongside them, kind of midwifing these projects about the land, the people, the communities, the soil, I mean, everything. So I have like a very granular connection to it through all these different lenses all the time. So I'll just share that perspective, which is, and then my own is just like much more heart-centered, just beautiful, beautiful mountains, and getting to know some local native folks also has really added a lot of richness.
Thank you. Well, before we go to the next person, I just want to reflect too, it's really great to see you here. And I remember connecting on some library initiatives and some really cool ideas with that. And I think you were here earlier when we shared about the cultural librarian exchange idea, and like the multi-generational cultural stewardship part. So seeing how the libraries could be part of that. I'm inspired about that one. So I just want to bookmark that. and then go over to Vincent next.
Hey guys, happy to be here. I have a question since this is my first time in one of these meetings that might seem pretty obvious, but I'm assuming what this Google spreadsheet represents is a list of different ways of mapping bioregions, like with different frameworks. And as someone who has not really been thinking about the different ways to split up or slice up the map, are there any, I'm curious, are there any one of these different frameworks, like in the column B, that are kind of like the highest source of truth, the thing that people most refer to? I'd be really interested to know which ones of these are most well used or widely recognized, or what types of work or projects in mapping are kind of using these different frameworks for mapping. To me, like looking at this, I can't tell the difference between which ones are ones that maybe just came up in the last year or two and which ones have been used for like the last 30 years. So that's kind of my main question, and something that would be, I think, interesting for people who are new to the space to understand.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also there was one in the chat about watersheds. It's sort of similar. It's like, who is defining the maps or not? I would say that we have not done a thorough assessment of all these systems, and in fact, by including them, we're not endorsing them or saying this is the map. Especially, I wanted to make that point that I think from a cultural perspective around bioregions that you know, that there isn't necessarily a way to map them in a purely geographic way. But that's actually, to me, that's part of the homework of the working out loud, is to be like, yeah, we should definitely do a little more, like continue the due diligence around these maps. Like, what do people think about these maps? Because we're actually not necessarily presenting a specific like level of certainty about it, and it's actually more of an open informing space. So like I was mentioning about the native land map, the value of that one is it does show overlaps. Whereas in a lot of these other systems, you wouldn't necessarily see an overlap. You'd see it as if it was some kind of line. And in a event here locally hosted by the Yakama Nation, they were talking about the river. It was a river celebration, 10-year commemoration of the removal of a dam on the White Salmon River here, which is really special and beautiful thing, and a regeneration. But what they spoke to was that their people were, the river did not divide their place, like that didn't divide them. So we could say, oh, the rivershed is a dividing line of a bioregion or something, but clearly in a cultural way, the people were on both sides of the river. So anyways, just kind of knowing that these maps are not the territory, even in this exploration of mapping. So love that question, and definitely want to like highlight that for part of the next steps too. And Vincent,
Yeah.
your input on that's great.
Yeah.
Carolina, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to add here that we are putting together different couple different frameworks that are specifically for finding siblings or finding analogs. So Andrew Millicent's framework, we put some of those fields in here, and the one from Byron was quite kind of a prototype. Everything's still out there. And in terms of those maps that you've seen, seems like that we've gathered, seems like bioregional mapping is still quite still seems like the space is somewhat experimental. If you look at the One Earth map that we share, there is a reference to this other work from 2017. So the One Earth map that builds on this work from 2017 to define bioregions, and this work from 2017 is the one on the map where you have ecoregions, where you can find the biomes. So they kind of, people have been building on each other. So I guess this one, the ecoregions one, is what others are building on maybe. But this isn't even necessarily a bioregion with the same name. So it's all very still quite loose and open.
Now, there's one resource I've had some contact with, and that's the planning agencies and the universities with landscape architecture programs and so forth. Every state in the U.S. seems to have very detailed ecology and geography maps, and it seems to me that the states are the strong force in the U.S. and that they probably already have some talk going back and forth between similar bioregions with other states, like the Adirondack bioregion, which is both cultural and ecological, would also be in conversation with the Vermont and New Hampshire similar regions, and that there might be some very useful structures to find that are already in place, as well as a source of maps. It's isn't it really the linkage between the nature of a place and the nature of the people that are there? As we talked about elsewhere, that's it's the organization of the culture that needs to coordinate with the place to make it a bio region, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then there's a sensitivity around the sort of colonial impact cultures and the anything that was existing prior to that,
Right.
and then how to that's where the spirit of regenerative bioregions does hold some sensitivity around both that pre-existing culture and then also the trajectory of regenerative culture, which may or may not be
Right.
happening, which is one of the reasons why you'll see fields like deforestation or degeneration or impacts and things like that, or the industry in an area, because of the duration of the extractive era, like just the cultural extraction approaches that have been dominating the ways that maps are. That's, for example, some of the most comprehensive mapping is done in order to extract resources, right? So how are we doing something different when we do this, or how are we doing something different in that? And that's where it became, for me, this exploration where it's not just mapping the resources, in any way, more so mapping, like you said, yes, the culture, the ways the humans are engaged in a place,
Right.
and both how it really is right now and also how it could be and how it has been. And there's room for seeing some of those. So I think that was useful. And I know Ben, please go ahead, Jesse, and then Ben after you.
Oh, I just to finalize I think the resources that the states have are not focused on industrial exploitation at all. They're just the opposite. It's understanding, how the communities interact with the environment, and they probably don't have a thought process that matches exactly the bioregion regeneration idea, but they're very much doing some of the same thing. There are lots of places where the clash between traditional tribal cultures and you know, corporate Western cultures is a very active process, and increasingly so. And it seems to me there's so much going on. There should be some kind of journal to find somewhere, some kind of newsletters that different people are publishing.
Just to bring it to that, I really appreciate what you're sharing, including the idea of what our part of the spirit is finding the others, finding the other efforts. And so even if a data set was only about the US and would therefore not be as useful elsewhere, in some ways, it could still be useful as a model. So I just want to thank you for that, and for any resources that you might have links to around it. But all the ideas are great, and anything in the chat, I see some more things coming in the chat. And I do want to shift over to Ben next, just to for the sake of our time. And thank you.
Well, and I want to honor the time frame that you have here and your commitment. So just a really short comment is to say that while I've seen the maps of the overlapping of indigenous, territories, if you will, before, I saw it in a new way today in the way you presented it. And to me, it's suggesting that, a deep way to think about bioregions is not that there's a set boundary to them. And a watershed technically does have one, but because we're including the culture and the people, that concept probably is boxing us in. And I could tell a short story of an experience that Madeline and I have had working in the Connecticut River Valley, if you think that's valuable. It's kind of demonstrating how this showed up for us. But I don't know that you may have intentions for the rest of our time. So
please share. Yes, love to hear it.
So we became one of the official bioregions of the Regenerative Communities Network that's hosting this summit back, how many years ago was it, Madeline? 3 or 4? And originally we called ourselves the Pioneer Valley Bioregion. Pioneer Valley is a designation specific to Massachusetts, and of course that's a settler term. So we were very quickly, that was very quickly pointed out to us, and so we changed to the Connecticut River Valley. Meanwhile, the Connecticut River starts in Canada and goes into the Long Island Sound. So all of a sudden, just even the name and the geography didn't make sense. And why were we just looking at the portion of it in between, Vermont and Connecticut, where Massachusetts lies? And so bit by bit, what happened was our attempt to put this particular boundary on it kept getting not derailed, but undone by, my friend Nate Bixby from New Haven showing up. And he's not even in the Connecticut River watershed, technically. He's in the Quinnipiac River, but he has very much to say about what we're doing. And we've loved having him in our weaving and conversation and event circle in our structure. But and I live in the Housatonic River Valley, one watershed to the west, but I have all these connections socially to people, in Amherst, where Madeline is, and to the groups that formed this collaborative. And so we've continuously struggled with, what is our bioregion that we're serving, and how are we organizing? And the attempts to define it in some specific geographic way, it's now just becoming completely obvious to me, are I would almost say silly, that there's some other way to think about it, which also means that when we think about sibling bioregions, is it really the bioregions that are siblings, or is it some collaborative cluster of stuff going on that wants to connect with some other collaborative collective of stuff going on in some other place that's actually generative? And yeah, there's geography involved, but it's fuzzy where it starts and ends.
That speaks to me, Ben. I've come to this conference with the question, what are bioregions in the Netherlands? Actually, the Netherlands is quite small. And we actually don't have valleys. We're flat. We have rivers. But we have so many rivers that I don't suppose that they will be like effective barriers to connect with people at the other side of the river, because we have been crossing rivers and lakes all the time. Plus, the whole of the Netherlands, there's hardly any pure nature there. Everything has been, really, every square centimeter has been redesigned quite recently for agriculture, for everything. Also, we don't have like original woods. For my soul, that is really a problem for my soul, because I cannot like connect in the Netherlands with the wider nature, except for at the coast when I look at the sea. But the sea at the moment also has like a different connotation, because now my first thought is the water rising and like flooding the Netherlands in the not even too distant future. So so I need to get my connection to zooming in on one tree or on a little flower, but it's kind of difficult to regenerate. But now back to like what then in the Netherlands is a bioregion. We might actually come out again at the national level, which could even, I know that all bioregional theory is like, don't mix it up with the governmental structures. But there might be an exception to that. And actually it might have advantages if at the national level, this awareness about us being a bioregion in ourselves with this comprehensive culture, I mean, if that awareness gets there, actually it might be an advantage, because the national level has power to like to implement, to legislate all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing this in.
Yeah, I mean, not mean to be interrupting you, but I totally agree. I mean, even in the way that the evolution of this process, the way Ben shared a story, is that my process with this has also included me being very certain that it's not about the maps only by any means, and that any layers are welcome, any ways of thinking, and that it's especially about being able to be in touch with a sense of place from a local to global level, you know, and then with a sense of time, backwards and forward. And so there's like, when we're thinking in terms of those ways, that's the exercise. And it's not that a nation state's boundary layer isn't useful in this era. Certainly it is in many ways. Yet we were all already quite bombarded with that one. So softening that one, it's almost like, you know, with the layers on the map and just using a slider to make that one a little less prominent, you know, to look at something else and see it in another way. And while topography does have a really obvious way of showing certain types of distinction, water flowing and those types of things. And I haven't looked closely at the Netherlands, but please do add yourself to this, to our data set here, you know, to the spreadsheet, and I'll be happy to explore that more. I mean, my intention is to keep, you know, making more sense out of this and staying curious as we go. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. And I did want to remind folks that we have another session next week at a slightly earlier time. And then we also have the Mapathon, which is on December 16th, which is one of the places where, depending on how far along with the prototype and the process, it might be the place where we really kind of work on the prototype more. But if we have time to do that in advance, we would be, you know, kind of sharing it at that point. But I'll put the link for that in the chat. And I think the next session, since y'all are here, you should be able to track for that. Yeah, so there's just a couple things. And then Carolina, did you want to?
Yeah, I want to say this discussion is really interesting. Also, all the levels of defining a bioregion, and I've also been looking at the comments in the chat, how we were talking about maps, and then interesting comments that we had from Killian. Like, okay, maybe we have these maps with really big bioregions. Maybe we need to divide them more. But then you get into other issues. It's always. Are you actually going to be able to define all these lines in a map? But this is a set bioregion. I think this is an ongoing discussion on how to define. And there are so many different moving parts, so many things to have into consideration. And I quite liked your thought of maybe what actually happens. Maybe you won't be able to define a sibling bioregion. It's not the geography. It's something that is there is some geography to it, but maybe a group here collaborating with a group there. Yes, those are also, that's something that makes sense to me. And there would be obviously some ecological and cultural dimension to it, but it wouldn't be strictly geographical. And one other thing that we would maybe just in this last few minutes invite a couple of shares is if there's anything that has come up to you that we should be looking at when looking into sense of place for a bioregion, or maybe establishing a relationship between bioregions or endeavors in bioregions, things that we could be looking at, other than, you know, we have all of these fields there, and folks have also suggested other levels like the biocultural corridors. So there are, I mean, there are different ideas. So anything that you have come up for you that you would like to share about this?
I would like to speak briefly. I think that when I look at kind of the insight that seems to be collectively emerging here around the fuzziness of boundariedness, it's interesting. When we look at a boundary, we think, well, what does it do for us? Well, it defines something, and then you can be kind of like on the inside or the outside of it, maybe. You can identify with it or not. I've seen this coming up in so many different places recently. We look at like organizations and they're looking for collaborators and they're looking for partners, and then they're like, wait, who are we? You know, and they have this like identity crisis. So I think this is one of the things about being able to see all the different layers, is that where you might look at one layer and there's an edge between you and, you know, the next spot over, you look at a different layer and you're like, oh, look, from this perspective, we're inside the same space. And obviously, like, I think this happens on a lot of levels. And then up at the global level, it's very, you know, it should become increasingly clear. Oh, here we all are on this, you know, spaceship Earth together. So I think it is, at some level, it's like, what are we looking to achieve? You know, to find the others who are having this realization that we're all in it together. Anna Lieke, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Huru, I'm remembering, I'm been speaking recently with a guy, Joe Colhane. I'm not sure if you know him, but he's got this really cool project that is literally about going out and finding your tree or your bird or your river or your other more than human, the more than humans that are all around. Like there's this kudzu plant here and it has a life that's going on. And actually, I think this invitation to create this, he's interested in the whole kind of augmented reality thing where we're placing these more than humans in the spaces around us as our cohabitants. I think this would be a really cool layer to throw on the many, many layered view of, you know, our many dimensions of belonging. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a ramble, but I'll stop there.
Thank you. And we've got Joe. Thanks for sharing there. And I'm just going to pass it over to Joe quickly. We're coming up on time, but still, please go ahead, Joel.
Thank you, Carolina. I just love what they have shared now. And nice to meet some of the older friends like Kila and Vincent. Nice to see you. And I was thinking about how it's possible for organizations have tried to be in an evolutionary purpose. Then these others organizations that have same purposes have just, you know, add for the same bioregional organization itself, you know. So the way for decisions making as a group, it's what validates self actions for our own bioregion, you know. And then you go for this direction of, you know, bioregion is a good place for the boundaries come for everyone, you know. So this is maybe good for projects that try to have a monetary tokens and this. I think it's more easy for it, even for a grant for governmental, financing and corporations, and because it's more easy for artists that are from that region to have a fund, for distribution in a smart way. It's what I maybe thinking.
Yeah, I really felt like part of what you're sharing there too is a bit around how the alliances and collaborations and the synergies can happen in the places. So it's almost like other layers of how that could happen. And we didn't get into it today talking about the sort of regenerative economic aspect, but that's another way that to play with bioregional identity and so on. And that was one of the pictures that we were looking at in the seeds ecosystem. And I think that inquiry is still alive through that space, looking at how to be able to use digital community currencies and regional currencies and that sort of thing, and have them be interoperable to each other, but also distinct, to build and strengthen more local values and support for local projects and artists and culture. So I'm still really interested in that inquiry as well, and I think it will weave in the work that we go forward with too. Part of our next session definitely going to be furthering this effort, and I do think it's probably going to be helpful to have some of the map prototype to work with. We may also work with the map, just the map from this event, from the Bioregional Regeneration Summit, as a context, and definitely would be nice to be able to have everybody that's coming into that space somehow be able to participate with what we're doing going forward. That's one of the outcomes of the overall event that we would like to see, and the idea of people having more sense of place and how it relates to others and how they can relate to others. At the end of the last session, I was talking about how I feel like all the bioregions are essentially siblings to each other, even if they have a really different climate and they're on the other side of the world. They're all part of one family of the Earth. And so it's just kind of another way to have that sense. So really, in terms of the summit, I hope everyone's really enjoying it and that you have a lot of opportunities to participate and connect more. Feel free to reach out or connect through the map too. And Caroline, I wanted to offer you, if you want to offer any closing sentiments as well.
We're close on time, so I just wanted to say thank you. Appreciate everyone for joining and for sharing your thoughts. We always gain a lot of insight from everyone's different perspectives. Always, so far the discussions have been very rich. So thank you everyone for adding your piece to it, and to contributing to the Google Sheets. I noticed that you all added yourselves to it. So yeah, thank you very much, and hoping to see you around in the summit.